couple of minutes. Just waiting for more people to log on. Christine, you tell me when you think we should get started. Give me the.
Okay. Give it like 2 more minutes.
Okay. Bear with us. We're just waiting for those latecomers.
Yep. Someone just joined. I know a few people just got the link, so we're just gonna let them head on in, and then we'll begin.
Okay.
Kaylin, no new signups since we last spoke?
Let me just double check 1 second.
Thanks.
One more.
Okay. I'll send them the link, and Eve, you wanna, we'll start?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm Eve Goldberg, the founder of Big Vision. I don't think I need to make anybody aware that these are challenging times that we're living in today. But for those who are struggling with their addictions, this is an even greater challenging time. I know that for Isaac, isolation was, by his own account, what took him down that very dark path. And I've spoken with a few mothers recently who've also lost their sons, young men, to overdoses. And we all said the same thing. We said, don't know how our sons would have survived this time had they made it till now. It's just very challenging. And the overdose rates in our country right now are skyrocketing, and it's really scary. We see it in our own community. Big Vision, we have a lot of members who just kind of disappeared. We haven't seen them. We don't really know what happened to them, and it's quite upsetting to us. And it's just a very, very scary time. So normally Big Vision, for those of you who don't really know who we are a community of young adults in recovery, and we're all about creating fun and meaningful activities, helping people find their passions and learn to live a sober lifestyle. So today you're going to learn a life-saving technique if you're in a situation where someone has overdosed. 6 years ago when Isaac died, I never heard of Narcan. The first time I heard Narcan was when the paramedics showed up at my apartment trying to revive Isaac, and they were using Narcan. There was no possibility of my having it in my home to try and save his life. I'm not saying that I would have saved his life, but I know I could have had the chance if I had it, if there had been access to it. So we're in a different position today. We're going to learn how to use it. We're going to talk about overdose deaths in this country, hopefully some things that we can do to try and turn this around. And we've partnered with the Coroner Project, we did this training before with Kaylin. Kaylin is the director of programming at the Corner Project in Washington Heights. And she's very knowledgeable, and she makes this very interesting, and she is fantastic. She encourages questions. So if you have any questions, Kaylin says you can just write it in the chat or raise your hand, but I think writing in the chat is probably the best thing you can do. I also want to let you know that we are going to be recording this. So if you don't want to be seen, you can turn your video off. And that's all I got for now. I'm going to turn it over to Kaylin. And again, thank you for coming. And I know you're going to find this very informative and helpful. So thanks.
Thanks, Eve. I'm just going to share my screen. Before I do, can everybody hear me okay? That's a yeah? Okay, great. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay. All right. Can everybody see that? Okay, good. And you can still see me? Okay, perfect. I always start this training by very weirdly giving a little bit of a disclaimer about myself. I think it's important that people know that I am born and raised in Northern Canada. I'm not actually from the US. I've been living here since 2016, and I came to the US to do work around the opioid epidemic and the overdose crisis. I've been working in harm reduction for 16 years. Most of that time has been in Vancouver, Canada, where it's just a completely different world in terms of harm reduction and practical approaches to working with people who use drugs. I used to run the safe consumption facility there, and I've opened consumption facilities, done heroin maintenance, heroin prescription, you name it, we've done it. There's a lot I know about harm reduction and overdose response. However, I had to basically relearn all of it when I moved here. Practicing harm reduction in the US, where the war on drugs was born, and where a lot of those philosophies are really enmeshed and ingrained in our criminal justice system, in our healthcare system, blew my hair back, and I really very quickly had to admit what I didn't know. So there's a lot that still applies. The mechanics of overdose response are still the same, but this training is based on everything I wish to God somebody had told me 16 years ago when I started in this field. I've intervened in thousands and thousands of overdoses. I'm very lucky to be able to say no one has died underneath me. Having said that, I am very aware, acutely aware of the pain of loss. I've lost, like so many of you, looking at the survey responses to how many of you have intervened or seen an overdose, was really moving to me, because it's a hell of a lot more than 50%. The vast majority of the folks who signed up for this training are familiar with overdose response in some form or another. And I think it's really important to just let that bomb drop. Just think about that. When you have 45, almost 50 people sign up for a training and 70% of them have experience with overdose, it's very, very telling. So I like to do a very interactive training. I want you to interrupt me. I want you to ask questions. I want you to call bullshit if something I say does not apply or is wrong. And if we get a little bit too close to the fire and you don't want to talk, I get that too. Last Thursday, we lost a beloved colleague at the Corner Project who'd been with us for 8 years to the isolation and addiction that Eve was referencing in the opening. He was self-isolating at home during the pandemic and overdosed, and nobody found him. And that's a beloved staff member of ours, so we're very much mourning that loss. So if you don't want to participate, because this is very close to home for you, I completely respect that. Okay, so who are the Washington Heights Corner Project and the New York Harm Reduction Educators, and what do? We do a lot of the same stuff as every other syringe exchange program in the US and around the world, but we are unique in the US in that we do a lot of overdose intervention work. And we do that by, and I'm being very honest here with you because I'm just assuming that we're in a trusting space. We have drug use happening on site where we can intervene if an overdose occurs. That makes our program very, very unique. The way we're able to do that is through a bit of a gray area around where the drug use is taking place. And we've essentially exploited the reality of the epidemic. So what do we know? Where are people using? They're using by themselves in their homes, behind closed doors, and they pass away. Or they're using in public restrooms, public bathrooms all over the city. They're using in parks, etc. So we've basically formalized our bathrooms to act as informal, safe consumption spaces, and we have plausible deniability when that door is closed. What you're doing in there is up to you. I have no idea. Are you washing your hands? Are you peeing? Not my business. But if something happens to you, we're there and we intervene in the overdose. So last year alone, our team has saved 600 lives with this program. In addition to all of the overdose response we're doing all over East Harlem, the South Bronx, and Washington Heights in New York City. Drug policy reform is big for us. It's a priority, and we do believe there are strategies that can end this epidemic that we have a lot of difficulty, ideological difficulty, even talking about in the US. And we'll touch on that a little bit more later. So I touched on this already. Thank you so much for filling out the registration form because it really tells me what I should tell you. And a lot of you have a lot of experience with both naloxone or Narcan and with overdose intervention. So we're just gonna gloss right over this and keep going. So one thing I like to do is I want everyone to have a foundational understanding, if you don't already, of the mechanics of an overdose, what is actually happening physiologically in the body that creates the overdose. So many of you probably know this, but just for the sake of review, opiates are downers or depressants, and functionally they repress the respiratory system. That's what they do, and that's what an opiate overdose is. It's a slow cessation of breath. And I think really understanding that as the foundation of an overdose is really pivotal to understanding how to prevent these from happening in the first place. So as you all know, too many opiates in the body means that breathing can slow to the point where the person is not getting enough oxygen to maintain brain function. So thinking of oxygen as gasoline for the brain. And there is a timeline in an overdose. And we talk about this a lot in our overdose response because understanding this timeline dictates what your response is and how far along the overdose is when you encounter somebody who's in an overdose. So opiates are ingested, breathing slows or stops, brain function slows down, and it's the brain and the lack of oxygen to the brain that tells the heart to stop. It's a 3-step process. It's not this dramatic sort of Pulp Fiction falling on the floor. They happen slowly over time often. This timeline and this 3-step process is why intervening in opioid overdoses is so challenging and why the epidemic is as bad as it is. So what's happening in the body can provide clues to how far along the overdose is. Now I'm sitting, so you can't really see it, and I'm a terrible actor, so just don't laugh at me, and I'm mortified this is being recorded. But I'm sure everybody, especially in New York City, everybody's seen people kind of doing the nod. That is the beginnings of an opiate overdose. But if I were to go up to that person, I see them on the subway platform or wherever, and I sort of touch their shoulder and I say, "Are you okay?" They're gonna wake up and they're gonna say, "I'm good." And then I'm gonna go, "All right, great, see you later." And I'm gonna go. And then slowly they're gonna go back under. What is happening there functionally is of before that progresses to the point that the brain tells the heart to stop. You have about 3 minutes after the brain starts to shut down before you start incurring brain damage, and before you start to have the signs of system shutdown. So you don't have a long time. Here's the other thing that we need to understand about this timeline. Overdoses don't hurt. What is an opiate? It's an analgesic. It's a painkiller. When we think of overdose and overdose death, we think of a medical crisis. This is a crisis where there could be loss of life. For the person experiencing this medical emergency, it feels the exact opposite. There is an absence of pain, there is euphoria, and they have no idea that they're dying. It is this very thing that is leading to the cataclysmically high death rates. The person doesn't know they're dying. The overdose can happen slowly over time. If you encounter someone in the beginning of this timeline, they may be able to respond to you and tell you that they're fine, which means you're gonna leave, but then they're gonna slowly tip over, and the person may reject your help. So what we're gonna talk about a lot is, where is the line? Where is the line in responsiveness and safety that tells you as the responder, this person is okay and you can leave, versus this person is not okay, I need to do something. Any questions so far? I am not monitoring the chat at all. If someone could do that. I'm gonna keep cruising until somebody stops me. So some examples of opiates. This is usually where I torture you and make you shout them all out, but there's too many of you and we're on Zoom, so welcome to the new world. But in New York, and I'm less familiar because I have not been on the West Coast in 4 or 5 years, but in New York, generally it's these opiates that you see here that are taking people out. This is by no means an exhaustive list. This list is changing all the time. There are analogs, there are research chemical opiates, you name it, it's being created in some godforsaken lab somewhere, but generally speaking, these are the opiates that people are using. I want to draw really close attention to codeine. Codeine is an opiate. Why are people dying using codeine? And people are absolutely overdosing and dying on codeine. Does anybody know? Do we have anyone in the chat? No? Oh, I see a hand. I don't know.
Because they're mixing it like kind of like a party drug, mixing it with soda or something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And certainly at the Washington Heights Corner Project and our other organization, from 2016 to now, we've seen this massive spike in young drug users who are graduating through lean. The drink is often called lean or purple drink, and there's a whole bunch of other terrible names, but it's essentially codeine, which is an opiate, mixed with alcohol, hard candy, and Sprite. What do we know about our young people? Young people binge. They binge whatever substance they're using. They don't know anything. They're not drug literate. Everything they know about drug use, they're learning from the internet, which is a terrifying prospect in and of itself. And then we have to think as well about what I call the half-life, or what is medically called the half-life of these substances in the body. So alcohol is a depressant. Teenagers binge drink. Adding just a small quantity of an opiate, which is a couple codeine pills or some cough syrup, is enough to kill that young person. And technically the cause of death is an opiate overdose. It's not even alcohol poisoning at that time, because it's the opiate combined with the alcohol, 2 depressants, which are going to shut down the respiratory system. So that's why codeine is on this list. What do we not see here? We don't see stimulants. Stimulants are obviously not opiates. They do the exact opposite. They rev the system, they ramp everything up. And what we know, what we're seeing right across the country, is we're not having very many single-use overdoses. Most of the overdose deaths are polysubstance deaths, meaning there's more than one drug involved. So if you're using a stimulant, why are you also using an opiate? Why would you want to do that when they have 2 very different physiological effects in the body? There's lots of reasons that people do that, especially people that are really enmeshed in street culture and street life and live on the street. But the reason, and we don't quite have enough time to go into why that is, because we're going to try to get this done in half an hour. But fundamentally, what we need to understand about these two drugs, and 80% of the overdose deaths are polysubstance involving a stimulant and an opiate, is that stimulants metabolize in the body faster than the opiate. So the stimulant wears off and the opiate takes the person out. So when you have speedballers, which are people that use traditionally cocaine and heroin, they mix them together. That's a dangerous cocktail, especially in the era of fentanyl, which is very, very strong, and we're going to talk about it. Because the cocaine, which is going to speed up breathing, speed up heart rate, speed up respiration, the cocaine is going to, the effects of the cocaine are going to diminish long before the opiate is going to diminish. So you can still have an opiate overdose from a polysubstance presentation. Are you with me so far? Okay, moving on. Now the big drug category driving this epidemic beyond opiates is what? Does anybody know? I can't see you all.
Is it fentanyl?
Fentanyl is an opiate, yep. But there's a whole other drug category that is really, really complicating the epidemic and leading to a lot of fatality. Anybody got a guess? Let's see. What are these? Anybody know?
Oh,
Benzodiazepines. So why are benzodiazepines such a problem? They're not opiates, but they are depressants. And here's the problem with benzodiazepines. They manifest in the body in a very similar way to an opiate. So if somebody was having a benzodiazepine overdose and I just found them on the street and looked at them, I would think they were having an opiate overdose. The presentation is very, very similar. However, naloxone does not work on them at all. It doesn't work. Naloxone doesn't work on anything but opiates. And its effectiveness on the opiates is even sort of coming into question now that we have these really strong opiates like fentanyl and carfentanil. It still works, but you need more. But so now we have this huge swath of people who are using benzodiazepines or are accessing benzodiazepines, and the overdose remedy that we have doesn't work. The additional problem is if it's mixed with an opiate. So by quick show of hands, how many people on this training are big time drug dealers? Anybody? Nobody's going to admit to that. But what I will tell you is our drug dealers are some of the smartest people we have on the planet. Anybody with a pill press can make a drug these days. It's that simple. So when I come up to, let's say I go to Eve. Eve's my drug dealer, Lucky Eve. And I go up to Eve and I say, I want Klonopin. Give me Klonopin. And Eve doesn't have Klonopin. What's Eve going to say to me? Here's your Klonopin. If I go up to Eve and say, I want cocaine, I want pure cocaine, give me the good stuff, and all Eve has is meth, what's she going to do? She's not going to say, I'm so sorry, I don't have what you're looking for. She's going to give me meth. It is not a buyer's market. It's a seller's market. A white powder is a white powder is a white powder. That's it. Drug users are getting what's available, and that's it. So you now have opiates, which are actually lab-produced benzodiazepines. They look, when you ingest them, and you ingest too much, the presentation is the same as an opiate overdose, but naloxone is not gonna work. What else do we not see on here? And this is gonna get a little depressing, but then we're gonna come out of it, I promise. We also don't have, of course, alcohol, marijuana, all of the prescription drugs, and then I would add the research chemical drugs that are coming out as well, of which there are thousands and thousands. The reason we put this here is we want people to understand and this is for me as well, how drug illiterate we actually are. This is what we're dealing with. This is the landscape of drug use in the US, and it's a combination of these drugs in interaction with each other that is one of the factors that is leading to us losing the battle against overdose death, because we can't keep up. So let's just talk about fentanyl for a second, because this is one of my favorite soapboxes. If I were to ask you the really inane question, is fentanyl good or bad? What would you say? Just by show of hands. Who would say it's bad? Fentanyl is bad. I can't see you all. I want to see you all. Oh, there you are. Oh yeah, we got some hands. Fentanyl is bad. Yeah, I get it. Oh, we got raised hands. Okay, great. So in Washington Heights, and I don't have one here, Rebecca Wilkins, do you have a question, or were you raising your hand at the fentanyl question? You can come off mute if you have a question and tell us your question. Okay, maybe not.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I'll make it really fast. I had to have major surgery from a major hospital in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And on coming out of the surgery, a 5-hour surgery, they had me on fentanyl. And I had already learned about this. And as I'm taking up to my room and having patients, because I was in there for 18 days, my roommates come in and out. They just seem to just give fentanyl just to give it. So I just want to say that I'm a strong advocate against it. I had them take me off of it. Maybe the first week I kept throwing up or whatever, but it's just weird how just everybody, different surgeries, were given this fentanyl right after their surgery. So that's my comment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Rebecca, I just want to clarify, you were on fentanyl for a week, asked to be taken off of it, and then you had withdrawal symptoms. You had nausea. Is that correct? After just a week? She's gone. We'll come back to that. Okay, so fentanyl. Fentanyl related deaths in overdose are up 750%. It is absolutely a contributing factor to this epidemic, but I want to unpack that a little bit. So in Washington Heights, we have a thing called the Canary Network. It's a very effective tool for preventing overdose death. And this is going to sound a little crazy, but we've got 9 drug dealers in Washington Heights who come to us and allow us to test their material for fentanyl before it hits the streets. This is important because people need to know what they're using if they want to stand a chance of surviving what they're using. Here's the thing. If we see a trend in overdose fatality or overdose occurrence in Washington Heights, we issue an alert. And on the West Coast, it's not so much like this, but the bags are branded in New York. They're branded with little artwork. In the West Coast, it's not so much that culture, but we post the bag with the stamp, geographic location about where the bag was sold, and the symptoms of the overdose. When we post one of those alerts and we say positive for fentanyl, linked to 25 serious overdoses and some fatalities, what do you think happens?
The word gets out.
And then what?
The people aren't buying them, so the dealers don't want to sell bad. They're not buying it as much.
Okay. First off, a little shout out to Amanda Kay, who is very much participating. Thank you so much. But the opposite happens.
Hmm.
The drug user in the neighborhood is, where do I get it? I want it. And it's just like moths to a flame. Now, why is that happening?
Because they want strong drugs.
Yes, exactly. We don't have strong drugs. So I just want to walk you through something as sort of a thought exercise, because it's very important to understand why we're in the mess we're in. We have two foundational plant-based drugs driving drug use in the US. They are heroin and cocaine. They are plant-based drugs from the poppy and the coca leaf. Do you think our drug dealers, again, some of the smartest people on earth, do you think they are going to even attempt to incur the risk of attempting to import enough heroin or cocaine from drug-producing countries with whom the US has terrible foreign relations? Afghanistan would be a great example. China, Mexico, massive drug-producing countries, Venezuela. Are drug dealers even going to bother attempting to import the enough heroin and cocaine to meet the demand for those drugs in this country today? Or are they going to say, you know what? I can make fentanyl in my kitchen. I can make meth in my kitchen. And I don't have to mess around with ships and boats and cartels and taxes and risks of arrest. I can have a tiny crew. I can make a brick of fentanyl like this, and it's going to be as strong as a cargo container of heroin. What do you think is happening? Heroin and cocaine are constructs. They don't exist anymore. They have been replaced by synthetic drugs that we cannot control the strength of. And that is fentanyl, primarily for opiates, and methamphetamine for cocaine. Now, going back to my good friend Eve, my drug dealer, when I go to Eve and I say, I don't want meth and I don't want fentanyl, I want heroin, a white powder is a white powder is a white powder. I'm gonna get whatever Eve has, which puts me at huge risk of death. So, going back to the original question, is fentanyl good or bad? I don't think it's either. I think we have a responsibility, and this is where people usually yell at me, so feel free. My job is to get people through their drug use so they live. That's my job. You cannot go to treatment if you die. You have no choice about what happens to the rest of your life if you don't survive an overdose. We can't waste our time telling people that fentanyl is bad. We have to teach them how to use it and survive, if we're going to, or we have to provide them options. So since time immemorial, there's been changes to the drug supply. Fentanyl is just the most recent change. And I want to draw your attention to a couple other really significant changes in the drug supply that impacted drug users and drug policy. Crack cocaine in the 80s. Massive change to the drug supply that had huge ramifications on the drug using community, particularly Black and brown people, because of the way we responded. Does everybody remember a couple years ago when they told us we were going to leave our houses and a homeless man was going to eat our faces off because of bath salts? Change in the drug supply that we responded to poorly. K2, change in the drug supply. Our job is to respond better, faster, to keep people alive. We do a ton of drug testing up at Washington Heights. We are happy to mail you these legal drug testing tools. We have drug testing strips for fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, benzodiazepines, and amphetamines. Anyone with teenagers or young people in their household should have these strips and should have naloxone. I know all of your kids are perfect angels, but I guarantee you their friends are not. And you do not want your kids to be without these tools if somebody shows up at a party with a bag of unmarked white pills. You want to know what that is, and you want to have naloxone there. These strips will tell you that. They're very easy to use. You literally just rub them on the surface of the pill or the powder, or rub them inside the residue of an empty drug bag, add a couple drops of water. 10 seconds later, you have a result line. You know what you're taking. Without these, we go back to that principle we were talking about before. White powder is a white powder is a white powder. You think you're getting cocaine, you're at the party, you think you're getting MDMA, ecstasy, Molly, whatever. There's fentanyl in it, you're done. We don't have the luxury of just praying our kids don't use drugs anymore. That ship has sailed. We're having a very different conversation now, and it's about tools to get them through it. And we can give those to you. We'd be happy to. All the way to California. We're not going to spend too much time on this because everybody knows how depressing this epidemic is. Okay, so what can we do about this? Well, we can use naloxone in these testing strips and we can save people's lives. So let's look at the mechanics of what naloxone does when it's in the brain. It gets into the body via injection or through the nasal. You guys are getting the nasal. Travels into the brain, and it kicks the opiate off the receptor, and it binds the receptor, it blocks it. I want you to know that the opiate remains in the brain. Time goes by, the naloxone wears off, and the opiate will rebind to the receptor, which means the overdose comes back. All naloxone is doing is buying you time. How much time you have depends on the strength and the quantity of the opiate on board. So if you get crappy Washington Heights street heroin, maybe you've got 90 minutes. If you get something close to pure fentanyl, maybe all you get is a slight improvement in color and an eye flutter. They may not even completely come back. Is naloxone a miracle drug? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Here's what it does and does very well. It absolutely pauses or reverses an opiate overdose. Only opiates. It does wear off in time, and as we said, how much time you have depends on the strength and the quantity of the opiate on board. It's perfectly safe. It doesn't contraindicate with any other medication or medical condition. We could all naloxone each other right now and we wouldn't even feel it. And it can and will trigger very bad withdrawal symptoms in people that have an opiate dependency. What it doesn't do is more important than what it does do. It doesn't work on any other kind of overdose. It's not going to do anything to benzos, it's not going to do anything to MDMA, ecstasy, nothing. It doesn't work on any other condition. You get hit by a bus, it's not going to help you. It's not guaranteed to be enough to completely resolve the overdose. Going back to the idea of the timeline, if the heart has stopped, naloxone is not going to be enough. If the person is still breathing or has just stopped breathing, very likely when you pull the opiate off the receptor and breathing resumes, you're probably in good shape. Here's a really important one. Naloxone does not immediately increase the amount of oxygen in the body. In New York State, don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, there's a big push around naloxone, naloxone, naloxone. Breathing is not as important. I want to debunk that right now and say that's 100% not true. We did a study in Canada of 10,000 people who overdosed. Almost 8,000 of them had some degree of cognitive impairment because their brains were left without oxygen for a long period of time. When we look at the trend of who is becoming drug dependent and who is overdosing in the US, it's young people, and there's a window after an overdose, which is a life-threatening experience where someone may want to make change. You cannot make that change if you come out of an overdose with a brain injury because nobody gave you breath. You need to keep the brain alive. Naloxone is not going to do that. You need to breathe for the person. Long before we had Narcan, Eve was saying even just 6 years ago when Isaac passed, she didn't have Narcan. We've been reversing opiate overdoses for 50, 100 years. We've only had naloxone for a small handful of those years. Oxygen is your number one tool. You must breathe for the person. Lecture over. All right, who's at highest risk of an overdose? And we're almost done. It's these guys. This is not listed in order of who's at most risk. All of these people are at very high risk. Seniors and the elderly, very isolated. Did I take my medication? I don't know. I'm gonna take more. What's going on? People using alone, that's number one. People who mix, We talked about that a lot. Alcohol is also a factor, benzos. Anyone released from an abstinence-based program is at very high risk of overdose because they don't have any tolerance. And usually they're released into the circumstances that cause their addiction in the first place. They white knuckle it through for as long as they can. They return to use. They use the amount they were using when they went in, but now they have no tolerance and it takes them out. Identifying an overdose. I want you to pay attention to the top 3, but you could see a combination of all of this. Really focus on the top 3. You're not going to be able to wake them up. They're going to have blue-gray lips and nail beds, and they're not going to be breathing. If they are really rigid, think about like cardboard cutout. You very likely have a fentanyl-involved overdose, but you may get a combination of these symptoms. You guys are getting the intranasal. You're getting the one that looks like the Starship Enterprise over there. I want you to know that that is a rocket fuel dose of naloxone. You're getting 2 of those. It's 8 milligrams. It is powerful, powerful stuff. The old concoction was 0.4 milligrams. You're now getting 8 full milligrams. This is a response to fentanyl and carfentanil. This is enough of a dose to pull those big boy opiates off of the receptor to buy you time. So what you're gonna do first when you find somebody who's having an overdose is you're gonna try to wake them up. I gotta go back here for a second. We skipped something. How you're gonna wake them up is very, very important. Hold on. We went too far. Whoa. I don't know what happened there. I want you to do the sternum rub here and the trap squeeze on the shoulder, and I want you to threaten them. It's called verbal Narcan. I want you to get very close to their ear, and I want you to say, if you don't wake up right now, I'm gonna have to call the ambulance. I guarantee you if there's a drug user in there who can wake up, they will, because who comes with the ambulance? The police. And no drug user wants to deal with the police. This is also not a time to be gentle. You're trying to inflict pain. We tell our staff when they're doing overdose response, I want you to grind the skin off your knuckles. We're trying to inflict pain. You're trying to activate the pain center in the brain. Same here. Get right in there and squeeze and yell in the ear. Don't shake them. We don't want anybody's head and neck trauma. We don't want heads bouncing off of sidewalks. And it's an impulse. It's a natural impulse, especially when the person that's overdosing is known to the responder. Think of mom and her kids. You go in, you grab, and you shake. But we need to protect the neck and the head. So we talked about this at the very beginning. This whole exercise is gauging what is responsive. Is the person okay or are they not okay? So when you activate the pain center and you're screaming in someone's ear and grinding their chest, you could get a response. You could get moaning, movement, eyes opening, fuck off, leave me alone, like you name it, you could get all of it. The point is, if the person cannot look you square in the eye and say, do not Narcan me with completely normal respiration, they either need ongoing monitoring for 3 hours or you have to give them naloxone. That's it. If you walk away and they droop back under, that person is at risk of tipping over into a full overdose and they cannot be left alone. You're gonna call 911. Very important you call 911 because what if it's not an overdose? You can do your best overdose response on a heart attack and the person is going to be very angry with you. Narcan wears off. We've talked about that. You don't know how much time you have. And overdose response is difficult sometimes. You don't want to be doing CPR on somebody for a long period of time. Transfer responsibility to a professional. When you call, depending on where you are and who you are, it's not always a good idea to say that it's a suspected overdose. We don't say that at all. We say the person is unresponsive and not breathing. We don't say anything about drugs or anything about naloxone. I've waited an hour and a half for an ambulance in New York City for a 16-year-old girl who was overdosing. I'm not doing that again. If you say unresponsive and not breathing, by law, they have to come. They have to bump you up as a priority call, and they have to come now. So I strongly suggest in this day and age that that's all you say. Your safety is the most important. You are going to be kneeling on the ground. You can't do an overdose response with somebody in a bed, on a soft surface, in a chair. They need to be flat on their backs on the floor. You want to make sure there's no sharps around. You don't want to kneel on a needle or a crack pipe or whatever else. So I usually sweep around the person with my foot if I can. In your mask or in your kit, which looks like this, there's gloves and a barrier mask. You're going to take them out and put them on. Gloves are there. Barrier mask comes in a little container like this. You're just going to rip it open. You're going to look for sharps, and you're never going to put your hands where you can't see. Especially in the winter, anyone who's working with marginalized populations, all our homeless friends like to have 10 coats and 3 parkas and 15 this and 20 that. All that drug paraphernalia is tucked in the folds of those coats. Zip down the middle, open it up so you have clear access to the chest.
Caitlin, we have a question.
Yes.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I was just gonna ask about calling 911, the step with calling 911. Is there any kind of specific language that we can or should use that might avoid like a police response in addition to the medic response?
Great question. Can I ask where you're located?
Portland, Oregon.
Okay, you're in Portland. Portland does not have a fentanyl task force yet. Many jurisdictions do. What the fentanyl task force means is that it's mandated that police respond to any suspected overdose. It's a part of the nationwide push to follow an overdose to the dealer to get the fentanyl off the streets. Portland doesn't have that yet, so you guys are probably in a better position to not have PD show up at your overdose responses. However, I don't think it's a guarantee, because when EMS arrives, they're going to do an assessment, they're going to figure out what's going on, and they may call. It kind of depends. I know that's like almost a non-answer. In New York, PD shows up before EMS, and it's often 11 of them with their guns. It's really, really bad here. I don't think you're quite there yet on the West Coast. Anybody else from Portland maybe knows a bit more about this? I see some hands. Anybody else want to bail me out here?
I just was going to say that I'm from California, and my son overdosed fatally a year and a half ago, and the police didn't look. They came, they tried to resuscitate him, but they didn't look through his phone or try to do any sort of investigation or anything. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. First, Amanda, I'm so sorry for your loss. I just wish I could give you a hug. What's happening on the West Coast is really different than what's happening on the East Coast. It's very different responses. The response in New York is really awful. It sounds like it's not quite as bad on the West Coast, but I'm sorry, Portland. I don't 100% have an answer for you because I'm stuck in New York.
I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so we covered this. You guys are going to get the nasal version. Very, very, very strong. You can see the person lying flat. You're going to have a really dramatic tilt of the head. It's going to go right up the nose. It's not going to go just here. You really want to shove it up there. And I just want you to be cautious of a few things. This is what it looks like. You're going to open it up. You're going to ditch the insert because you don't have time to read it. And it's going to go right up the nose. You really do want to push it. Just be very careful not to accidentally depress the plunger because it's spring loaded. It's like a Dristan spray. And I don't know if you can see it, but I'm going to press it. Done. It's gone. If you accidentally hit this, you're going to lose your dose. So tilt the head way back, shove it way up, and then hit it. And you're going to get a really strong dose in one nostril only. I think we have another raised hand. Okay, I'm going to keep going until that question comes. When you give your first dose, I want you to give it 2 or 3 minutes to work. Like I said, this is 4 milligrams of naloxone. It's a lot. Give it a second to pull that opiate off the receptor. Doesn't mean you're going to be inactive just staring at the person for 2 or 3 minutes, like doing Hail Mary after Hail Mary. You're going to get busy. You're going to open your naloxone, or sorry, your breathing mask, or I just use my teeth badly. Oh my God, watch me not be able to open it. There we go. You're gonna open it up and you wanna be able to read the writing. I'm gonna bring it really close so you can see. I don't know if you can see it, but it says CPR face shield. Can you guys see that? Whoop, there it is. You wanna be able to, if it's facing the other way and you can't read the writing, your one-way barrier mask is facing the wrong direction. So you want to make sure you can read the writing. It's going to go right over the face with the circle over the mouth, and there's an indicator to plug the nose. Tilt the head back, drop the chin, 2 breaths. They don't call it mouth to mouth for nothing. You really need a tight seal. It's mouth to mouth, and you're going to go You want to make sure the chest is rising, not the belly. You want to take your mouth off between breaths so the breath you gave can come back out. We inhale and we exhale. Rescue breathing is the same thing. You're pushing the air in. They're going to expel the air. And you're just going to go breath, breath, check. And you're going to check for a pulse for 5 seconds. Checking for the pulse for 5 seconds is a device to calm you down as much as it is to check for the pulse. You don't want to hyperventilate someone, and you can't. Mouth to mouth is not, it's breath, pause, breath, check. So where can you find a pulse? I want you to look here, and I want you to look where the thigh connects to the pelvis. Now, you're gonna start here because this is obviously an easier place to check. I want you to grab the windpipe, slide your finger and your thumb down, and take off your thumb. You'll notice that I'm not being gentle, I'm pressing. Do it on yourself so you can feel your pulse. And I've been yelling at you for half an hour or so, and I've got a pulse, but in an overdose response, it's gonna be really weak. So you gotta dig for it. You're not gonna check here or the ankle because you're not gonna find a pulse there. If you don't find a pulse, you're gonna do compressions, only if you're comfortable. Anyone who's CPR trained is gonna do 30 compressions, 2 breaths, check. 30 compressions, 2 breaths, check. You are only doing compressions if there is no pulse. If there is a pulse, you're not doing compressions because the heart is beating. Compressions are only to beat the heart. Tying it all together, you're gonna give naloxone in the nose. You're gonna give 2 breaths, mouth to mouth, chest is rising, not the belly. You're gonna plug the nose. You're gonna check for a pulse. And at this stage, you're doing the dance with the pulse. If you have a pulse, you're just gonna breathe. Breath, breath, check. You're gonna breathe for 2 or 3 minutes. And if they don't wake up, you're gonna give the next dose and go back to breathing. Here's the good news. If you forget everything I just said and you do it all in the wrong order, I don't care. All I want you to do is give the naloxone and breathe. Breathe for 2 to 3 minutes, give the next dose and go back to breathing and just don't stop until EMS comes. That's it. If you do it all in the wrong order, completely fine, as long as you do those steps somehow. This is the most important part of an overdose response. When the person wakes up, it's a complete myth that they're gonna punch you in the face, call you, etc. It's not gonna happen. That happens when the face that they wake up to is a threatening face, a scary face, or a law enforcement face. As I said, I've responded to thousands of overdoses. I've never had anyone respond that way to me, because what they see when they wake up is somebody who really cares about them. You have to have your best bedside manner, reassure them they're okay. You have no idea if this is a suicide attempt, you screwed up, if this is their 5th overdose, if this is their 1st, if they saw the light and decided to come back, you don't know. Your job is to tell them they're okay, let them know they had an overdose, remind them that the Narcan wears off, and tell them to stay with you. If they leave you, they're at very high risk for overdose death, because why? Does anybody know? We are almost.
Narcan wears off.
Yes, Narcan wears off, and it triggers withdrawal in people who are opiate dependent. So the first thing they're gonna wanna do is go and use more drugs. Go and use more drugs. They won't work. You've blocked the receptor. But it is like piling an overdose on top of an overdose.
Caitlin, there are just a few questions in the chat.
Okay. How do I find them?
One is from me.
Let me see. Does someone want to read me a question? Oh, here we go. Oh my God. Okay.
Starting with, when you give them one shot and they don't come out of it, can't we give another one? Basically, it's related to how many doses can.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, naloxone does not cause harm. So if you forget what I said and you give both doses back to back, no problem. Just go to the breaths after that. If you wait 3 minutes and you give the second dose, you wait 1 minute, you wait 30 seconds, you wait 10 minutes, I don't care. Just get the doses in, go to the breathing. Just don't forget the breathing. Is there another question? Christine, do you mind reading them to me? Because I can't see them.
Sure. Lisa, you ready to ask your question? Go ahead.
Yes, and you said that it has 8 milligrams in there, but initially we give them 4, and we do the breathing, check the pulse, and all of that. And then if that doesn't work, we give them the other 4 milligrams, right?
You got it. Yep. So
Okay.
one of these, give it 2 or 3 minutes, get on the breathing, assess,
Okay.
are they waking up? What's going on? If they don't wake up, give them the second one and go back to breathing. You've
Okay.
got the ambulance coming.
Right.
You're holding ground until the ambulance gets there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions?
Yep, there's one in the chat. If you're unsure if they are overdosing or not, is it better to give it and be safe, or no? You mentioned being on the floor. What happens if they are on a bed? What do you do?
Great question. Absolutely. When somebody is overdosing, you are not going to have the luxury of saying, are you having an opiate overdose? Because they're going to be unconscious. You are absolutely going to proceed. Just do it. Remember that it won't hurt them. If it's not an overdose, it's not going to hurt them. If it is, you're probably going to save their life. As a backup, if you are unknowingly doing your best overdose response on a stroke, doesn't matter. The ambulance is coming and you're not going to hurt them. So please, 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 even if you don't know for sure, just do it. Just get it in there. If there is an opiate on the receptor, you want to pull it off as quickly as you can. Somebody on a bed, that is tough. What I do, because I'm little, is I take all the pillows. I almost just turned my computer to show you. I won't. I pull all the pillows onto the floor and I literally drag. The point is, at least they have a soft landing. I want them to have a soft landing, and I drag with, I'm at the head so that the head doesn't hit the floor, but everything else can hit the floor with pillows underneath them, and then pull the pillows out. But it's tough, especially if you're on your own. If you're not on your own, then, get someone to help you carry them down to the floor.
Yeah,
Other
I have
questions?
a follow-up question. Yeah, Kate, what, I kind of meant before they're unconscious. I had a situation that let's say because Narcan is not harmful, right?
Yep.
What happens if you have a situation that you witness someone doing drugs?
Yep.
Then they start to pass out, or they're why not? Do you have to give it to them, or would you recommend waiting until they're unconscious and then because that to me that seems like, we had the situation that we witnessed one of our clients doing drugs one time, and basically we gave him Narcan just to be sure.
Yeah.
He was not unconscious.
Yeah, so the situation you're describing is a critical situation. So what I would do in that situation is, you don't know how many people at the gathering or wherever you are have Narcan. And if the person goes all the way under, you want to have it. So I would do, in that instance, I would do old school overdose response. And old school overdose response is all about agitation. It's walking, it's sternum grinds, it's keeping them awake. You're riding out the overdose. You're trying to get the oxygen level up so the brain doesn't shut down. Things you cannot do in that situation. And this happens at parties all the time. Oh, they've had too much, I'm gonna put them to bed so they can sleep it off. Do not do that. It's the opposite. You stimulus, stimulus, stimulus. High knees, cold, walks outside, jumping jacks, all of it to try to keep the oxygen level up. Riding out an overdose is a pain in the ass and it takes a long time. If you are not able to do that, call 911 or use your Narcan. But remember, if it's an opiate will stay in the body for 4 to 5 hours. And if you use your Narcan early and it wears off and they go out again, you have nothing. So in that situation, if you can keep them roused, keep the oxygen going so the brain doesn't shut down, do it, or call 911. That would be my
Thank you.
there. Yeah, does that help?
Yes, yeah, 100%. But the last thing I just like, I'm honestly unsure of is like, if you find someone passed out on the bed, like dragging them to the, like, it seems like an extra step to drag them to the floor. I would feel like I would hurt them when they're on the bed, passed out, or a couch or something. Just like,
Yep.
the first response would be to hit them and call 911. Like, not be like, so like, I just, but I hear you, but I just like, that's like, you know, what I'm thinking, you know?
I would tweak that a little bit. So if it was me, if I'm being honest,
Of course, yeah.
really honest, and I saw someone on a bed, somebody called me and said, shit, somebody's overdosing on the bed, I would do the naloxone first to get it in there and working, and then I'd put them on the floor for the breathing. And I'd call 911. And often, depending on if you're with somebody, like if me and Lisa are together, I'm going to say, Lisa, call 911, say somebody's not responsive, not breathing, and then I'm going to do the naloxone and get them on the floor at the same time. You know,
100%.
you know, things can happen simultaneously, but I hear you. In that instance, if someone was on the bed, I do the naloxone first too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed this. Why do you not want them to be on a bed?
If you have to do CPR,
Oh, okay.
or to do good rescue breathing, they've got to be on the floor.
Okay, got it.
Otherwise, you can't get the air into the lungs as well.
Okay.
I you know, again, it's just the difference in recovery and brain health when people breathe versus don't breathe is night and day. Yeah. Okay. I'm happy to end it there. I do want you to know that you could get vomiting and anoxic spasms. It's a fancy word for seizures. I want to tell you that though it might be scary, both are a very good sign. If you have someone who has anoxic spasms, and they can be the full shaky, shaky, shaky shake, or they can be a real tense kind of like, that's a great sign. They happen very early in the overdose. That is the brain going, what's going on? Where's the oxygen? Where's the oxygen? Anoxic spasms or seizures happen between minute 0 and minute 7. Very good sign. Just let it happen. You can still get naloxone in the nose. If the person isn't fully spasming, you can still do the breath, nothing in the mouth, protect the head, but just count your lucky stars if you're there when the seizures are happening, because it means you're there early. Vomiting, same thing. It's just a response to the naloxone. You've either triggered withdrawal, which means the brain is still registering chemicals, or it's a response to the overdose itself. We're not going to worry about this because you're not in a consumption facility. Recovery position post-overdose, never leave anyone on their back. You want to roll them over. and support the head. So if there is vomiting, it's going to come out. You don't want to do a brilliant overdose response and then have someone choke on their vomit. Vomit is very common post-response, especially if you've triggered withdrawal. Get ready for it, mums. You're going to be scooping lots of puke out of mouths, but you've got gloves on. I highly recommend getting a pulse oximeter. If for anyone that works at an agency or works with people who use drugs, this is the tool that's going to tell you how effective you're being. It's going to tell you if you have a pulse, and it's going to tell you what the oxygen level is. And if you're getting zeros, it's going to tell you you have to get to work. And then over time, as you do your response and oxygen levels come back up and heart rate comes back up, it's going to let you know it's working. They're very, very cheap and easy to buy on Amazon. I'm going to send you all this. It's a little guide to overdose response step by step. It comes in a sticker and a flyer. You can stick it on something or you can keep it in your pocket. And then I'm going to just quickly cover the Good Samaritan law. It's okay to do an overdose response on someone. You are protected, even if you break ribs with CPR, even if the person does not survive. However, this does not apply to everyone equally. And so just, I'm going to send this to you when I mail you your kits so you have it, but there are some very specific exclusions that people should be aware of. That's kind of it. We're going to be mailing you kits to all over the country. You sent me your email addresses, so I'm going to email you to confirm I have your address correct and I have the number of kits you want correct. I'm also going to ask you if you want any testing strips, and let me know then. And I'm going to mail it out to you. With the pandemic, I have no idea when it's going to arrive. I hope sooner rather than later, but thank you very much for your time. And if anybody has any questions, I'm available.
Thank you, Kaylin.
You're welcome.
Can we get a recording of this presentation? Is that possible?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I have a lot of friends with teenagers, and I think that they should all see this.
The other thing I want to offer is I'm happy to do this again. This is a huge part of what we do. I have no anywhere, anytime. There are, you know, it's important.
Excellent, excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Kaylin.
Any other questions? Great.
None here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
That
Kaylin.
was,
Thank you. Thank
that
you.
was incredible.
You're very welcome, everyone. Have a great night, and I'll connect with you over email soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone.